So we are live. So we'll give a chance for people to start joining us. And then we will get going. But thanks for joining us anyway, Phil. I know that people are looking forward to hearing your story.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, good. Have you had the storms that we've had up in the north?
We had a lot of rain and wind on Saturday. Hasn't been too bad since then, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, we weren't too bad. It's we didn't get all the snow that they forecast, and it's been very wet and windy, but nowhere near as bad as we thought it was going to be anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so let's get started. I'm just going to encourage people to post in the comments box and let us know, that they're here. So it's always nice to actually see the comments, isn't it? So we've got proof that there are people watching, even though we know they are. And then we'll get started, and then people can be asking questions later on as well. So, okay, so Phil, I know this has been a long journey for you. And you're still on your journey. And as we were just discussing, actually, it's always nice to hear from people who've taken longer to recover, because it's not all about reading a book and recovering or doing an online program and recovering. Many people need a lot more time and insights to be gained and finding information from different places and one-to-one support or whatever. Everybody's different. But there are many people that take much longer to actually go through their journey, basically. Yeah. So should we start? Do you want to just start and give us an idea of where it started with you and what your journey's been like so far? And I'll just sort of interject, or people can ask questions as you're going along.
Yeah, okay. So it feels really weird to be talking about symptoms specifically, because usually I try to avoid doing that as part of my recovery. Not really focus on them, not talk about them very much, and usually use vague words like symptom rather than anything specific. But one of the things that I did when I was preparing for this is I did actually go back and I wrote down a list of all the different symptoms that I have at some point experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be kind of helpful for me to just actually see that and realize how much has changed.
Absolutely. And also good for people listening to connect, because there'll be the odd sensations, symptoms that, yes, I always tend to encourage people to say sensations, but there'll be other people who can probably relate to you by certain symptoms that you're going to mention. But just say hello to Fred, who's just arrived. Hello, Fred. And anybody else who wants to just pop in and say hello, that would be great. So yeah, go on then. Let us know all these symptoms that you've had at some point or another, Phil.
Okay, so in childhood, I definitely had ear infections sometimes, and I used to get a lot of coughs and colds, probably more than average, and kind of sinus problems.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, I think that was probably related to stress and my immune system being, not quite as good as it could have been. And I don't know if this is TMS, but I had this weird unexplained dental infection that kept recurring. So I kept getting an abscess underneath one of my teeth, and they kept treating it with antibiotics, and they filled it, they refilled it, they did a root canal, and it kept coming back. And it also often used to happen on bank holiday weekends, so it used to often involve trips to emergency dental places. So looking back, that just seems like an interesting coincidence. So I'm wondering if there was something going on there, and eventually I had to have the tooth pulled out.
So clearly your immune system not working very effectively then either.
Yeah, exactly. And I also was a very anxious child. I had anxiety back as long as I can remember. I didn't know that it was called anxiety. I just used to know that I used to be worried and frightened a lot as a child.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a feature of childhood for me. The first kind of definite clear TMS symptoms for me probably started when I was about 20. So that is going back 30 years, because I'm 50 now. Anyone who's watching this who doesn't know me, I look quite a lot older than I am, which is probably a side effect of being transgender. It kind of seems to go with the territory of transgender men.
You're saying that you look older than you are?
Did I say it the wrong way around? I look younger than I am.
I was about to say, yes, you don't look older than 50, you look 50.
Yeah, people don't usually believe that. So, and yeah, I think it goes along with with being transgender and just kind of my face looks a bit younger. So,
right.
So going back 30 years, I first started to get musculoskeletal pain. Started out with the classic, the most boring symptom of all, lower back pain.
Yep.
And once I started getting that, I used to get it it used to keep recurring. Sometimes it would be quite a bad episode, and sometimes it would be not that much, but it would just kept coming back. And it also at that point then started to kind of spread. So, and again, looking back, I think that a lot of the reasons that it spread was because physios and chiropractors kind of drew attention to other areas of muscle tension, which at that point I wasn't recognizing as pain. But after going for my lower back and having a chiropractor sort of checking my whole spine and saying, oh, there's a lot of tension up here, and your muscle, don't you get neck pain? Do you not get shoulder pain? And funnily enough, after that, I started to get neck and shoulder pain. So your musculoskeletal pain. Yeah, exactly. So the musculoskeletal pain kind of just spread everywhere. And like over the years, I had lower back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, upper back pain, muscular chest pain, pain in my hips, legs, ankles, wrists. Like the only thing that didn't hurt was my feet. And interestingly enough, that was my symptom imperative. I'll come on to that later. I thought that was kind of a nice touch, that the one bit that hadn't hurt, my body decided to throw at me.
Yeah.
I sometimes had nerve pain as well as muscle pain, and generally experienced like a lot of stiffness. Along with that, I also had tension headaches, jaw pain, sensitivity like in the roots of my teeth, and that kind of facial pain, like mildly. It wasn't a huge symptom for me, but when I hear people talking about that, I can recognize that was something else that I experienced. Abdominal pain, like quite severe abdominal cramps, sometimes like kind of colicky type pains. Pelvic pain. I had recurrent yeast infections that sometimes didn't test positive. So I think, again, my brain was creating a symptom in the absence of an actual infection. Constipation, vertigo, sore throat, some kind of loss of my voice quite frequently, palpitations, eczema, psoriasis, and fatigue. So that was all a list of physical symptoms, which are something I've experienced.
Takes a story.
So along with that, I suppose the psychological symptoms, which I think, are so often TMS equivalent. So as I've already mentioned, anxiety, but I also experienced periods of what I now recognise as depression, although it went untreated because I'm very bad at going to the doctor. I mean, I had all these symptoms, but I didn't go to the doctor for a lot of them. I hate asking for help. That's kind of part of my issue. So again, like undiagnosed depression, untreated. I also had disordered eating for quite a long time, and substance misuse in the past, and generally kind of addictive, obsessive behaviours around things. So other kind of maladaptive coping strategies. So all sorts of things there that were going on or had been going on. The physical symptoms that I was experiencing, the musculoskeletal ones were the ones that dominated and the ones that I was the most concerned about, and those are the ones that had the most impact on my life. Fortunately for me, I was never one of those people who had it so badly that I was disabled. I was always able to do relatively normal things, but I did have a lot of fear about things, and I would sometimes avoid things that I thought were triggers, so certain types of exercise, for example. And I would sometimes worry about running, so I'd start swimming instead, and then I'd get a stiff neck, so I'd stop swimming and try running again. So that kind of back and forth. The symptoms, I honestly can't remember when they became constant rather than intermittent, because it was this very slow process of like a sore back and then a sore neck and then maybe a sore knee. But looking back, I would probably say from about the age of 30, so 20 years ago, I think I probably had constant pain to some degree, whether it was very low grade kind of stiffness or whether it was something more severe.
Right.
That's probably the last time I could remember being completely pain-free. It would probably be before I had children. So I had kids when I was around the age of 30, and I think that's when the symptoms really settled in and just got worse and worse. But always at this level where I didn't worry about it that much, hence not really going to the doctor and saying what's going on with me, why do I ache all over. I just thought everybody aches all over. I just thought that was normal.
Yes.
And it wasn't until it started to really escalate about 6 years ago that I started to worry, because that was when the musculoskeletal pain, I started to get more nerve pain at that point, and I also started to get kind of strange tingling sensations in my arms and hands, and patches of numbness, like some patches of skin that would feel numb. So at that point I did start to worry more and started to kind of Google more, which is how I eventually ended up discovering the mind-body stuff. I started to Google scary things, wondering maybe I should go and get this checked out. But I always noticed fluctuations, and I always noticed that stress seemed to make it worse, and that relaxation seemed to make it better. So I think at the back of my mind, I kind of always felt it wasn't anything structural, although I would often put down the musculoskeletal stuff to injuries, but then they would kind of get better, but then something else would flare up. So
was it always, do you think, the musculoskeletal, were they always linked to things you've done physically? Or looking back, can you see that there were times when maybe you woke up in the morning with pain, but you...
Oh, no, absolutely. They were never really linked to anything physical, but I used to go to the physio and they'd say, what did you do? And I'd say, well, I'd been running a bit further than usual, or
typical.
Spent a lot of time in the rapids at Centre Parks, pushing myself out of the water with my hand, and had a sore wrist, but that was like 3 months ago. So looking back, none of it really made any sense. I never had something that I could call a clear injury. I had some of the worst symptoms that I had before I discovered the mind-body approach was shoulder pain, really quite intense shoulder pain, and I had a separated shoulder on an X-ray, very slight separated shoulder, where the ligaments had stretched.
Right.
Even that, there wasn't a fall, there wasn't a shock, there wasn't an actual injury, and I put it down to overtraining, doing too many weights and press-ups and stuff.
Right.
But really, I think it was more down to the fact that I just had chronic muscle tension, and that the muscles were just pulling on my joints and making them hurt.
Or maybe some of them were tense and some of them were lax, and that laxity showed up.
Exactly. But even that, I think there wasn't a clear injury that happened. Physio was baffled, and so again, now I look back and I just think I'm pretty sure that was down to the tension, because the muscles in my neck were just constantly like that, and so my shoulders were pulled up, everything was just out of alignment. And
so did you start actually going to see a specialist, for example, if the therapy wasn't working, when you said things got worse 6 years ago?
I didn't, because I was already seeing physios on a regular basis. I was paying to see physios privately, because here in the UK, if you actually go to the GP and say, I've hurt my shoulder, they say, oh, we'll refer you to physio. And then 9 months later, you get an appointment. So I never saw the point in going to my GP. So I hardly ever saw my GP for the pain. I did have lower back stuff investigated many years ago. I had an MRI on my lower back and they didn't find anything unusual. And then after that, that almost put me off going back. I did have the shoulder checked out because I could feel the lump where the shoulder had separated slightly. So they did check that out and confirm. So I had like a couple of, I had an X-ray and I had a ultrasound on the other shoulder, because interestingly, I got the exact same thing the other side a year later. Classic PMS, and on that side, the pain was exactly the same. And on that side, they found bursitis. But, I think it was just this chronic muscle tension. I had to be lifting my arms because everything was just locked up and everything hurt. So I think that kind of brings me up to date with like where the symptoms were kind of at their worst.
And eerily saying, oh my God, you've really suffered. So pleased it all has a happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, it feels worse than it did at the time, because at the time I was just so used to it and I was dealing with it. And I tried to ignore it, but didn't always succeed. And I did definitely start to worry as it was escalating. And I think by that time, once I was kind of suffering constant widespread pain, once I started to get the tingling and the muscle weakness, at that point I'd looked up. I'd been avoiding looking up fibromyalgia for ages because I kind of knew that was probably what I would have if I went to seek a diagnosis, and I kind of didn't even want to know about it because I just didn't help me to know that. But I had looked it up and I had kind of self-diagnosed, and I spoke to the GP about it when I was there for something else, and just said, I don't want the referral because I don't think it's going to be helpful for me to know. Because at that stage, again, I had already recognised that it was stress related, and so I figured that I would be better off trying to manage my stress and not freaking myself out with the diagnosis. So at that stage, I'd already started kind of doing some meditation and trying various kind of like relaxation techniques, and I did notice that they helped.
Right.
But that on its own wasn't enough, and that was probably around about when I then did kind of discover the TMS mindbody approach. So thankfully, due to my Googling, probably due to looking up fibromyalgia, I got a curable ad on Instagram.
Yeah.
And as soon as I clicked on it and started reading about it, I immediately just thought, this makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I downloaded the app, started listening to the education recordings on there, and it was just so clear that was what was going on with me. And but what Curable did for me is it added all those extra pieces that I was missing. So I'd already worked out for myself that I didn't really have any major structural problems, and that it was related to stress. And it was also related to my own obsession with the symptoms, because I would make it worse when my shoulders were tight. I would be constantly stretching them and trying to get them to release, and I could see that was making it worse, but it was almost like an obsession. I couldn't stop myself. Sitting there and going like this and going like this all the time, and trying everything: foam rollers, massage chairs, tennis ball up against the wall. I had this thing called a trigger fairy, which is like a curved plastic thing.
I use that as well.
So much of
your story resonates with me, Phil. It really does. Yeah, I've been there, done it.
I just did everything, and none of it worked, and most of it made it worse. And I realised that. And so as soon as I discovered Curable and started reading, I was like, oh, thank God I can stop doing all those things.
Yes.
And I was never so happy as to ditch that foam roller and the torture device of the trigger fairy and very expensive massage chair. I was like, it never made me feel any better anyway. I just get rid of it. So that part for me was really easy, was just ditching the physical kind of those things and embracing.
How easy, sorry to interrupt, Phil, how easy was it for you to stop doing the stretching, the actual physical?
That bit was not easy, and I still catch myself doing that now. That's something I still have to watch. If I have a slight increase of something, I have to consciously catch myself doing it. And now what I do is I do some breathing instead when I notice myself wanting to stretch something. Or
it's about then using it as almost as a clue, as a sort of like pause and change, do something different.
The mindfulness aspect has been really helpful for me.
Absolutely.
So I mean, the beauty of the Curable, and I also, at the same time as discovering Curable, I also was introduced to Nicole Sachs's work and to journal speak, which has been a huge part of my recovery. And that was the other thing that was really important for me, was recognizing as well as the stress related aspect, also the emotional part was really important for me, because I had some sort of fairly significant childhood trauma that I just hadn't addressed or even really recognized. And for me, kind of going back and working through some of that with journal speak was really helpful in recognizing that that emotional component was important. And I'd had therapy before. It wasn't that I hadn't done any emotional work, but I hadn't made the link between the emotional issues and the physical symptoms. And so just making that connection was also really, really important.
I think that's really important. And I think it's quite common for us as practitioners to see people who've had a lot of psychotherapy in the past But if the client nor the therapist understand the concept and recognizes that the sensations and symptoms they're feeling are related to those what's gone on, then the chances are that they won't actually change. So I think it's a lot of traditional psychotherapy is in the head thinking and making sense of things, whereas actually now with the work we're doing far more somatically and encouraging more emotional awareness and making the connection, like you said, mindfully, emotionally with the symptoms. But whereas with psychotherapy, traditional psychotherapy, that's not what they're doing basically.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I was one of those people who was like, how can I have mind body? How can I have psychosomatic pain when I've had all this therapy and I'm really self-aware and I'm really in touch with my emotions? And I also thought I'm a really emotional person, like, because I used to cry a lot, I thought. And although when it got worse, maybe not so much. And I'm also the sort of person who has quite a hot temper, so I can lose my temper quite easily. So I was like, I can't be suppressing anger because I'm always shouting, I'm always shouting at the cats. Yeah. Slamming cupboard doors, and for me there was just this whole recognition that just because you experience some emotions doesn't mean that you're feeling all your emotions.
No, absolutely.
And you can still be suppressing things and squashing them down, and there can be things that you just are not allowing yourself to look at.
Absolutely, yeah.
Looking to see where I kind of got to. One of the things that I haven't really said, I suppose, for me, like in terms of untangling some of the reasons that I specifically had chronic pain was helpful. And so, you know, what I'm prepared to share of that I thought might be useful for people, just in if it resonates for other people. So as I mentioned, I had some childhood stress. And again, I didn't have capital T trauma, not in my family of origin.
You didn't? What was that?
I didn't have capital T trauma in my family of origin.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with that. I think there are a lot of people who are like, again, nothing really bad happened to me, so why do I have fibromyalgia or chronic mood disease or whatever it is? And for me, there was a lot about recognizing that although my parents did their best, there were some significant issues around emotional expression in the family and around emotional closeness and connection.
Yeah.
That was my parents' trauma that meant that I didn't have that strong emotional connection to my parents. And although I know that they loved me, I didn't always feel as if they loved me. And that, for me, was a really important realization. And I think that's something I see a lot with clients, is that, you know,
and I think that's very common, isn't it? It's incredibly common that people don't really take that into account until they really get into this. Right?
Yeah, it's not that you necessarily had a really bad relationship with your parents. It's just that disconnect and that lack of emotional support. And I suppose, like, the thing that I always knew was a trauma for me, which wasn't a surprise, was going to boarding school and being bullied at boarding school and being really socially isolated and excluded. Right. For quite a long period. It went on for like more than a year at school. Wow. And that was definitely a big trauma for me. And the trauma also in my response to it, which was that I didn't go to my parents for help. So I obviously felt very alone with it. I didn't feel able to ask for help from the people who were eventually the people who helped resolve that. Because I asked for help from teachers, but it didn't work. And it wasn't until I told my parents that things changed. But that was really a significant thing for me, which has left really, really deep.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm sure. And as Early says, she's, you know, love that insight, Phil. You knew intellectually you were loved, but you didn't feel it. And it's this feeling, isn't it? It's what's missing.
Yeah, it's that embodied feeling of being loved and cared for. And I think if you don't have that as a child, then that is a really significant loss, and it makes a big difference. In terms of adult stress, I mean, obviously my gender identity is a significant factor for me, I think, and that's one of the reasons that I would like to do these interviews, because I think it's something that I'd like to see more discussion about in circles, is that kind of intersection with various marginalised groups, but particularly LGBTQ plus is an area of interest for me, because anecdotally from people that I know and from trans communities that I'm involved in, there seem to be much higher than normal rates of chronic pain and stress-related illness in those groups. And for me,
no surprise really, when people are growing up and often trying to hide it, or first of all confused about their gender. So confusion and then embarrassment and shame, and depending on when they grew up and where they grew up, the factors that are involved in that as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's obviously a really significant stressor. If I look back at my life in terms of, as a child, I didn't have the language, and like the world didn't really have the language to describe my experience then, because I didn't know that it was possible to be transgender, and neither did my parents. And so my experience as a child was that I was brought up and socialized as female, but I always felt really wrong to me. And so my narrative as a child was like, I want to be a boy, and I just got told you can't be.
Yeah.
So that was something that, looking back, was this childhood stressor. And then basically when I was 11, I got sent to an all-girls boarding school. So there was no space there for me to have any kind of gender expression that felt right for me. A younger child, I used to dress like a boy and have my hair cut short. And once I went to boarding school, the only way I could fit in was by leaving all of that behind. So I feel as if I totally abandoned my inner child at the age of 11, and and then it was survival. I learnt how to be the girl that everybody told me I was supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Adult, I carried on just trying to play this role that I felt had been forced on me, but never felt authentic. Really, by that stage, I had no idea why, because I kind of almost suppressed a lot of that desire to be something different.
So what confusion that would cause, especially during teenage years, and not being able to show your authenticity.
Yeah, and eventually I didn't even realize that was what I needed. I buried it so deep that I had no idea for many, many years. I just didn't realize and didn't really think about the fact that I'd had any issues with my gender identity as a child. It was probably safe for me to not think about that.
Yes, absolutely.
So that, again, looking back, I think was a significant cause of stress, because I think there was an awful lot of suppression that was going on for that, and probably explains why I had some of the kind of mental health issues that I had, and this kind of general, that I now recognise was gender dysphoria, but I didn't know why. I just felt wrong all the time and felt like I didn't fit in, and nothing ever felt right.
Yeah. So no wonder you had all those symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it makes sense. Makes sense that things would have been coming out that way. Yeah, and I also know I have a lot of the personality traits of people with chronic pain. I can recognise a lot of those in myself. Being hard on myself, being perfectionist, not always about what I do, but often about what other people do. So that kind of like wanting to control people and outcomes. That really resonated for me. Yeah. So, and the other thing to mention, it's probably no coincidence that my symptoms got massively worse around the time that I started to realise that I was transgender. So when that emerged and it came into my consciousness and I started to understand it and make sense of it.
And that really was quite late, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was when I was about 44, so about 6 years ago. And that was just a really, really difficult time for me, because I had so much fear about what it meant, because once I realised, I didn't feel like I could ignore it, but I was happily married to a straight man and had 2 teenage children, and I just felt as if I was going to destroy my family if I did anything about it. But it would have destroyed me if I tried to keep it a secret and not done anything. So it was kind of like, I just felt like I was trapped in this impossible situation, which of course is the perfect recipe for mindbody.
Yeah, no wonder those symptoms came out.
Yeah, exactly.
What a challenging time. Wow.
It was just screaming at me because there was so much fear and so much stress. And then when I did come out, that did mean the end of my marriage. So then there was the grief to experience around that, which I suppressed because it was too much to feel. And again, I can recognize now that was a big driver in my symptoms becoming really, really bad at that point, because I just didn't let myself really grieve the loss of my marriage, because we were still sharing a house, we were still co-parenting, and we were very amicable as much as we could be. So I couldn't really let myself feel hurt or feel angry with him for his decision. I didn't feel like I had a right to feel angry with him. So there was so much stuff there about keeping a lid on all of that and all of this
Did
stuff.
you have people that you could talk to about that? Did you have support at that time?
I had some friends that I could talk to, and I had some therapy around that time, but just still felt like, just more than my brain could process. So I had to go somewhere, really.
How courageous, though, to make that decision. I mean, it would have been so much easier for you to just stay in that position, that situation you were in. So there's obviously huge courage within you.
I'm not sure, though, because I think at that point I didn't really feel like I had another choice, because I'd been struggling with mental health for so long. And I think that once I knew, if I tried to ignore it, I just think that I would probably have had some kind of a breakdown anyway. So I think in many ways it felt like, although it felt like an impossible choice, it felt like I chose the survival choice for me.
Yeah, but you made that decision. That you felt was the right one for you.
Yeah. Oh, I've just seen Irilee's comment, and yes, that's exactly how I feel about it. Is the way when Nicole talks about that, which was it's worse. And for me, it felt worse to have just tried to forget it. The other thing as well is that when I did talk to my now ex-husband about it, it kind of came out. I just couldn't keep it on anymore. It wasn't a planned discussion that we had. It just blurted out one night after a couple of too many drinks. And once I told him, then he also actually said to me that he felt that just knowing that made a difference to him, and that he thought he could feel the same about me anyway. So in a way, he kind of almost set me free to go on the path that I went, because he by just even by that knowledge, for him, it already changed things. So it was certainly a really incredibly difficult time when I look back on that.
That's surprising. And then, yes, like Irilee said, you were saying, Nicole was saying, that it's about the choice between what hurts and what hurts less. And it is about having to make a choice. If you want to make a choice, then yes, it's going to be difficult, whatever way you're going to make it. But sometimes even just having made a choice can make things a bit easier. But yeah, it's very challenging.
Once I made the decision that I was going to transition, there was some relief in that, because it took me about 2 months from telling my husband and then him saying, well, think about it, but it already feels like nothing's ever going to be the same again. And so for those few months, we didn't really discuss it. And I was just thinking about, I couldn't think about anything else for 2 months. And then eventually decided I'm going to have to do something about that. And once I'd made that choice and that decision, I think then there was some relief in that. But then after that, I made some other bad decisions in my life, which then kind of compounded my symptoms. Because after my husband and I separated, I then got involved quite quickly in a new relationship, kind of a rebound relationship, I guess. And I got involved with somebody who, I'm still very fond of him, so, and I think he wouldn't mind me saying this, but it was a very toxic relationship. We were not good for each other. It was, he was quite dependent on me, and I became incredibly codependent, trying to look after him and take care of him, totally ignoring my own needs at a time when I was really vulnerable, because I had just lost my partner of 20 years and was coping with navigating the world as transgender, newly out, getting misgendered all the time. I was in a really vulnerable position, and so looking back, what I needed, like a hole in the head, was to get involved with someone who was younger than me and who was very vulnerable and who needed a lot of support. And looking back, it's probably why I got involved with him, because he was the perfect distraction from my
Absolutely, yes. don't have to worry about your own problems there.
Yeah, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and
you've learned an awful lot from it as well. So it was a wonderful learning opportunity. Looking back,
exactly. Yeah, and actually, that relationship, although it was a toxic relationship, that relationship taught me so much. And I kind of think that if I hadn't got involved in that relationship, my symptoms wouldn't have got worse, and I might not have discovered the mind-body connection, and I might still be stuck back where I was, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yes.
Because through that relationship, I had to learn about taking care of myself, and I had to learn about boundaries. And you know, he was very good practice for that, and he's quite proud of that. We can laugh about it,
but it is interesting because that can be quite hard when you're going through it, can't it? And it seems to be that people sort of, say, oh, well, this, what a wonderful learning opportunity. But actually, when you can start turning it around and look at it like that, then you can begin to become more self-empowered and rationalize and take what you've learned, rather than feeling a victim from being in that relationship, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so fast forwards to when I discovered the mind-body approach, that was 18 months ago. And at that point, I was still in that relationship. We were living together. It was awful. We were just fighting constantly. There was so much tension, so much stress. But I felt very responsible for him and felt very trapped in the relationship. So when I kind of discovered the mind-body connection, started doing the work, started journaling, I immediately recognized that relationship was a huge trigger. And I very much wanted to believe the thing which people often say, which Sano used to say, is that you don't have to leave a relationship, you don't have to leave your job, you can still get better.
Yeah.
But I just felt quite strongly for me that staying in that relationship would not be serving me, regardless of my symptoms. Once I truly started to notice how triggering it was and how unhealthy the dynamics between us were, I realized that was something that was going to have to change. And that was part of me getting better, was ending that relationship and changing the dynamics between us. And having
I think it's important to say that, like you say, Dr. Sana would say, you don't need to change your circumstances, and quite often you don't. But there are times, obviously, like you've shown, that it's more beneficial for you when you do. But there might be times when somebody feels that they'd like to, but they just can't, or they can't at that time. And even just considering like the benefits and drawbacks of staying in the situation or changing the situation can help you then become more empowered and actually decide, make a choice that, okay, I'm going to stay in this situation for the next 6 months, then we'll reevaluate. Because you're basically telling your unconscious, okay, I'm not going to resist this, I'm not going to fight it, it's my choice to stay and deal with whatever's going on. And that in itself really changes the way you react to what's going on. But then there comes a time, like you found, when you think, no, do you know what, this is not healthy for me, and I need to get out. And so it's very independent on each person's circumstances, but you don't have to get out of a situation necessarily.
I think, something about, recognizing what's going on and not just staying in a situation blindly. And if you decide to stay because it's what hurts less, what hurts and what hurts worse, and if actually staying in that relationship feels like the better option, then you choose and you give it a go. And you maybe look at changing the boundaries within that relationship, or you look at having some therapy as a couple, if that's something.
What can you do to improve the situation?
But definitely questioning and seeing what, if anything, can change.
So Rachel has said, thank you so much for your honesty, Phil. I've also had to consider the terrifying possibility that I might need to end my marriage and other care relationships in order to honour my true self. So I really value hearing this. Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it? And it's to have you so honestly speaking like this, Phil. Which is the reason you're doing, is that you can help other people.
So. Yeah, and just to say to you, Rachel, I know how scary that is. It's a really, really horrible position to be in, to think about having to end a relationship, whatever that relationship is like. If you're in it, there's a reason that you're in it, even if there's reasons that you think maybe you shouldn't be. with my partner. It's like, although I recognized that we weren't good for each other and that in many ways the relationship was really, really difficult, at the same time, I still loved him and I cared about him and I didn't want to have to end it. And so there was a lot of conflict for me around that and kind of working through that and using journal speak to help me and using meditation and all the kind of relaxation, stress reducing techniques to help me cope while I was deciding what to do was really helpful for me.
And Susie says, I think relationships can become very challenging when people don't validate TMS.
So I think I was fortunate that most of the people in my life actually do get it and were quite open to it when I started talking about it. So that was something I've been quite lucky in that regard. I haven't really had to sort of argue with people about what's going on with me. We've mostly understood it. I have one sister who I haven't really talked about it with because I don't think she's interested. But apart from that, people have been pretty good.
And I think that is something that many people find, that people in their families don't validate it, or maybe they have symptoms and they don't get it. And it can, yes, it can be a cause of stress, absolutely. But yeah, not easy. So Chris says, already a great voice of reason in Nicole's group and no doubt others. We need TMS soldiers like this. Absolutely.
I've just realised I should probably say a bit more about recovery because I've talked a lot about how I got into this mess and gave you my laundry list of symptoms at the beginning. So a little bit about what my recovery looked like. And so as I said at the beginning, part of the reason that I wanted to do this interview, and I did kind of, when Georgie asked me, part of me was like, no, don't do it yet because you're not healed yet. And then I thought, that's bollocks, excuse me, that's rubbish because healing is a process. It's not this kind of like black and white thing. For everybody, it's a process. And for some people, that can be quite a short process. And for other people, it can be a really, really long process. And there isn't really a destination of like 100% perfectly healed. A friend of mine said to me earlier today, I think in my Facebook group, said that she considers herself to be 100% imperfectly healed, which I thought was really lovely.
Yeah.
and I was sort of saying that I'd probably consider myself, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say I feel about 75% better, which is great, and that's fantastic. And if that's as better as I ever am, then that's fine, because I'm absolutely happy being like this and trying to stay outcome independent about the rest of it.
I think it's important, to consider that as well. What is 100%? I mean, we all are humans. We all have emotions. We all have sensations. And I think that it's very rare that anybody would not have some sort of sensation, whether it's the beginning of a headache or a bit of aching or tension or whatever. That's life, and especially with what's been going on in the last 2 years. And so what is 100% anyway? I think nobody can be perfect, and 100% is perfect, and I'm not perfect. And therefore, oh dear, I'm not 100% recovered.
Exactly. I mean, I would say that now, almost all of my chronic symptoms have gone, and of the list I read out at the beginning, some of those I never ever get anymore. I still have a bit of musculoskeletal pain sometimes, and I still have some stiffness, but a lot of the things that were really bad are now hardly a problem at all. So my neck, shoulders, upper back, arms, which were one of the really big problems, those are now pretty much fine most of the time, and occasionally I'll get a bit of twinge or a bit of tightness, but I don't pay it too much attention and it doesn't really stick around. Most persistent issue that I still have is in my left hip, but even that varies sometimes, and it can sometimes be a lot better and then it can sometimes be a lot worse. It always has a fairly clear link to stress.
Which is great, because you can then see those links and then work on that, and each time you're progressing. So go on then, what else did you do?
I think for me the biggest thing was getting away from the fear, and that happened quite quickly. Was not being scared of it anymore and really believing that it was getting better and that I didn't need to worry about it and I didn't need to pay too much attention to it. In terms of what I did, I mean, I was already using relaxation and meditation, and those have continued to be really important for me. I definitely was a very hypervigilant, anxious, kind of highly strong person a lot of the time. And so learning to use breathing to settle myself, slow myself down, and just drop into that place of relaxation has been probably the single most useful tool that I've learned, and that is just so incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
I try and meditate every day at least once, and some days I don't, but that's fine because I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Yeah, right. And as Enda says, aiming for 100% is what makes us TMSs in the first place. And Lucinda says, what meditation do you do?
It depends what mood I'm in. So I used to always use guided meditations at first because I found them easier when I was learning to meditate. But now I find that I enjoy silent meditation sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in. So it can be all sorts. I particularly love some of the ones on Insight Timer. Sarah Blondin on Insight Timer. I love her meditations for self-compassion. Those are the ones that I'll turn to if I'm feeling low or really need that kind of bit of self-compassion boost.
Yeah.
But generally, yes, a bit of a mixture. Quite often silent meditation these days, or just putting on some kind of like really relaxing music and breathing with that.
Interesting question from Susie. How do you decide between the doctor and meditation?
Well, me, it's always meditation because I hate going to the doctor. I have to be thinking, I have to literally probably be thinking that I'm at death's door before I pick up the phone, but that's probably not a very good answer for me.
And also, you're so aware now, and you understand what's going on in your body. So if you suddenly develop a pain, you know that it's not going to be, if it's a musculoskeletal pain that you've just woken up with or whatever, that you know that it's linked to what's going on rather than actually an injury when you haven't had an injury. So that's the reason why you wouldn't need to seek help anyway.
Musculoskeletal pain, I would never go to the doctor. But obviously, if I have some new symptom that was potentially, then I would be sensible and I would get it checked out. But if it's a symptom that I kind of know and is familiar for me or is similar enough to those, then relaxation. As far as other things that I've done, so the education part was really useful and interesting, and that really helped me to breathe and to feel safe and kind of, give me the tools for what to do. As I said earlier on, the emotional piece was very important for me. Using journal speak was a big part of my healing. I did probably a straight month at the beginning where I did journal speak every single day. Then after that, I started to use it maybe like a few times a week. But then if I have times where the symptoms increase, whatever, or if I'm feeling particularly stressed or anxious, then I'll always go back to journal speak and use it regularly for a while. So I go through phases of doing it every day, maybe for a week or so, and then sometimes letting it slip a bit if things are going better. But that was really helpful. And the kind of the personality trait work, recognizing the sort of thinking patterns that were playing into my internal stress. That was another thing that was important for me. And I did that mostly through journaling. I think journaling helped me to identify these different thought patterns. And one of the things I quite enjoyed doing was dialoguing, giving the different parts of me a voice. So I recognized that I had a lot of tension around work. At the time I was writing, that was what I was doing for a job, and I recognised that when I was sitting down to write, I would always get symptoms. And so one time I kind of did this journaling exercise where I let my inner critic have a voice in the page and saw what he had to say. Recognised there were a lot of things there that I could hear my father's voice in the sort of, you have to work, you have to work, time, and then I kind of thought, what's in me is hating this, and recognised there was this kind of inner child part of me that absolutely didn't want to be sitting at a desk. It was sunny outside. I didn't want to be inside working, so I let the inner child kind of have an argument with the inner critic, and that was really, really, really interesting. Just recognising that conflict on the page helped me see. No wonder I get a lot of symptoms around work when I've got this internal conflict going on, and then seeing what I could do to help settle that conflict down. So prioritizing self-care and fun times and trying to have better work-life balance was helpful for me with that.
Fabulous. Yeah, so earlier saying, did you direct your own recovery or did you work with someone?
I didn't work with any TMS sort of specific practitioners. I did it, so it was all kind of self-learning. I bought quite a few books and followed obviously like the Journal Speak group and read information on there. But I have been having some therapy, but the therapists that I've worked with haven't been specifically mind-body therapists. But I did choose to look for therapists who do the kind of work that supports this work. So I had a few months of ISTDP therapy, which is intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy, which Dr. Schubiner, I know, recommends.
It does, yes, yeah.
And that was really helpful because one of the things about that is that the therapist really gets you to tune into what's happening in your body. So it really helped me to get better at recognizing emotions in my body and recognizing them before I shut them down, which is what the therapist would notice. She would say, "What happened just then?"
Yes.
And I would have already shut that down. And I'd be like, "What?" And she was like, I think I saw anger. And I'd be like, no, because that was one of the things I discovered in ISTDP therapy, is that I really struggled to feel any anger in that therapy, because I was seeing there was a lot of transference for me, and I was kind of seeing my parents rather than her, because she was like the authority figure in that situation. And it made me realise how much anger I must have suppressed as a child, because getting angry with somebody who was reminding me of my mum was just absolutely not acceptable, and I couldn't do it. And I would suppress and suppress and suppress to the point where I'd end up dissociating in therapy sessions, which was just, I learned so much from that process.
Right. Oh, that's good.
That was very helpful. And I'm now working with an internal family systems therapist, because I love internal family systems. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's a model of therapy where you work with the different parts of yourself. So it fits beautifully with mind body work, because it fits with the personality trait work and the inner child work, because you kind of get to know your inner critic, and you get to know your perfectionist part, and you get to know the inner child parts that are often quite sort of either very angry or very sad about things. And that's quite early days, but I'm finding that really helpful. But I have still got some stuff I need to do.
Great. And there's so much of a link now with that IFS, and especially Howard Schubiner has worked with Dick Schwartz, who developed IFS, to really show how pain can be helped with IFS. And there's a lot of interest now, isn't there? Really helpful.
And if anyone's interested in that, Dick Schwartz has got meditations on Insight Timer. He's got IFS meditations in there.
Great. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Because I noticed that someone's asking for the names of the therapists.
Yes.
I can do, but I know they both have waiting lists, so I'm not sure if it's worth it. The ISTDP therapist is called Julie Beckett, and the IFS therapist is called Carmel McKenna. But there are others, and there's like directories online where you can find them, but a lot of them have waiting.
I think that IFS, especially, they're a long waiting list, because it's become so popular and so needed, especially over these last couple of years.
I want to train to be an IFS therapist. That's one of my goals. But trying to get onto a training is a challenge.
That's difficult as well at the moment, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. So Chris says, can I ask where you recommend looking for that in the UK? I think you mean ISTDP. So ISTDP, certainly there is a UK organisation. You can look on there. Some of them are aware of Dr. Sarno's work and our work, and some less so. I do have a list of people who have been recommended by two of the people in our global group who are specialists in ISTDP. So if anybody particularly wants to look at that list, then I could certainly send you some names. And Lucinda said she didn't get the IFS therapist's name.
It's Carmel McKenna. Again, there is a list on the international IFS site of therapists, and you can search by location.
Mm-hmm.
She's called Carmel McKenna.
And Chris says that, yes, the Pain Psychology Centre, but the therapies advising very pricey. Unfortunately, ISTDP is very pricey as well, isn't it?
Yeah, ISTDP was definitely very pricey.
Yeah. So, are there any, we've got 5 minutes left, any final things you want to say? If there's any particular questions, do ask, but anything else that you want to, that you think would really help other people, Phil, about relating to your recovery?
I mean, I guess I'd say that, you know, I think you can do so much of this work on your own. It can be helpful to work with somebody, sure, but you can do a lot of it on your own, and particularly the IFS model. I think that's something that lends itself very well to journaling and meditation and self-reflection. So if that's something that you're interested in, but therapy isn't available to you, and you can't afford it, and you don't know how to find a therapist, then I think just by learning a little bit about it, if you look it up on YouTube and just get a basic understanding of the model, then it's something that you can do a lot in your own work, just in terms of noticing what gets out spaces in a significant situation, and recognizing, you know, what comes up for you and how many different things come up for you, because that's the whole that's the whole premise of internal family systems, is that
and sometimes we
reactions that can be in conflict.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes the working with somebody else is about helping you get over your own barriers, unconscious barriers that we don't even realize we have. And I think that's why one-to-one support can help when you're struggling on your own, when you've got somebody else who can notice, like you said, the ISTDP psychotherapist would notice when you were stopping down anger, for example. Often people will say something that you know is quite emotional, and they'll suddenly laugh, and that's their learned behaviour of actually avoiding feeling how they're feeling. And having somebody who can reflect back to you can help you just get over some of those barriers that we all have that stop us from actually accessing the unconscious stuff.
And I think the other thing about working with a therapist or a coach or whoever is that that relationship itself for some people can be an important part of the healing process. If you have issues in your relationships with other people, if you have social anxiety, if you have kind of attachment issues and a lot of fear about being judged by other people, then if you have a really good therapeutic alliance with someone who you're working with, and you feel safe, and you feel seen, and you feel validated and supported, then that in itself can be quite healing.
Yeah, I'm sure. And further back, Lucinda had said, what did you do about your anxiety? But it sounds like all that you were doing was actually then having an impact on your anxiety, as well as...
the anxiety is part and parcel of it all for me. I think I see it as being just a different manifestation of the same thing. So relaxation, meditation, positive self-talk, all of that, I think, has just helped with the anxiety a lot as well. Susie was asking about being part of the TMS community, being validated and connected, and yeah, I think that's been really important as well, because you know, the TMS community for the most part is so welcoming and supportive, and there's so much kindness and generosity in that community. And so that's
altruistic groups. And through all this as well, obviously, I mean, you came across this, you said 18 months ago, and over the last few months, it's involved actually going through the SIRPA training as well, hasn't it? To then, and for coaching, and then so that you could then do the SIRPA training. So all that has been presumably all beneficial in your own learning, as well as helping other people.
Yeah, definitely. My favourite thing that I learned on the SIRPA course was the emotional awareness exercise, which is on YouTube if anyone doesn't know what that is. You look it up. Georgie's done a recording on YouTube. But the emotional awareness exercise is like, it's just really simple, but it's really, really effective. Just closing your eyes, tuning in to sensations in your body. It's a bit like somatic tracking, but you're attaching it to an emotion as well, just noticing what comes up and just create that safety around whatever you feel.
And our own journey that we're doing then helps other people, and we've all been on this journey ourselves, and I think that then helps us when we're then working with our own clients. So just finally, anything on forgiveness?
Forgiveness, I think that, if you mean forgiving myself, then I think self-compassion has been a huge part of this work for me, learning to have more self-compassion. Forgiving other people, I think that's something that I still probably have some work to do. But I think I used to forgive people too easily, and I've almost had to go back and actually recognise the harm that certain people have done.
Mm-hmm. So feel the feelings rather than just go into forgiveness.
But yeah, certainly self-compassion has been a really important part of this work.
So we are going to need to finish now, but just to finish with, yes, Susie, connection is at the heart of recovery, and it is about being authentic. That's one of the important things about being able to be authentic and live the life that you want to live, basically, as best you can. I haven't got time to go into anything now about forgiveness. I know we did it in the Mindbody Wellness group last year. If you want to go back and have a look at that, Lucinda. We also have a loving kindness meditation that's on YouTube that I think is hugely helpful in forgiveness as well. And so, but we are going to we're running over now, so we are going to have to stop, I'm afraid. But thank you all for being here and for the great questions. And
thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Phil. I know this has been really appreciated and will be appreciated by other people who are going to be listening in later on as well. So thank you for your authenticity and for sharing so honestly.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good evening. Goodbye.